Hey, this is Chris Roper, and here we are with Ninja-Gaiden-Sigma for the PlayStation 3. Tecmo's remake of sorts, revisioning of, in some fashion, of Ninja Gaiden and Ninja Gaiden Black for the Xbox. The game is sort of a mixture of those two and then new stuff thrown in there. It's kind of like the third iteration of Ninja Gaiden, and I mean, it's easily the best one, of course. It looks the best, but there's also been a lot of refinements to the game that it takes out some of the things that you had problems in the original. There are still some issues with the camera and things like that, but overall, I mean, this is you expect it to be, but it clearly is the best of the three. Now, there's plenty of new content in the game. You'll find some new enemies here and there, and you'll find some new areas. For example, in the second level, Ryu goes back to his hometown as being burning, and you fight a guy on the bridge that everybody hates. And then at the end of that level, in the original game, you would just see a cutscene where Doku would come out and do some very bad things. In this game, you actually get to play a sequence where you go inside of a burning house and you kill some dudes in there, and you come outside, and then you can actually fight against Doku. You can't actually kill him in this part because you're supposed to kill him later on in the game, but it's pretty cool that scene is interactive in some fashion, even if you can't actually win that. And speaking of tweaks, there's been a few things added to the controls. For example, you no longer have to tap the jump button to run on water. You can basically just head straight out into it, and so long as you keep moving, you're going to sprint along the water. It makes it a little bit easier because a lot of people missed this the first time playing through the original game. They didn't even know they could run on water, so it makes that a little bit easier to use. The biggest addition to the game, though, is the ability to play as Rachel, who was a character in the game, and previously she would just sort of show up. She was a fiend hunter. She would show up, you'd talk to her, she'd tell you some stuff, and then she'd go off and do her own thing. You'd meet back up with her again, and vice versa. But in Sigma, you actually can play as Rachel in some of her sequences, where basically you control when she goes off and you see what she's doing on her end. One benefit of this, aside from just having another character to use, is that you actually see more of the storyline. At least now with Rachel, you see some of the how the fiend works and how these creatures and stuff are formed and where they're coming from, like in their lineage and stuff, because you find books but it didn't make any sense before it, so it helps clear it up a little bit. It's still kind of a confusing story, but there's a couple more things in there that help tie it in. Now, as for Rachel's control, she's more of a tank character. She's carrying her hammer, and it's extremely strong. It'll take out enemies like no problem, except that she's also not very fast. Her coolest move, though, is that while blocking, she has sort of a counter evade where she can flip over characters and then you can take them out from behind. But I mean, to be honest, she's not really all that much fun. She's not nearly as fun to play as Ryu, and fighting the faster characters with her is kind of a pain, especially when they're surrounding you, because she's not very fast, and that's not really the sort of game that it is. But it does help tie the story in, and it's kind of new, especially for older players. So I mean, the addition is nice, but it's not as good as we'd hope that it could be. Now, one of the things where the game has been improved upon is some of the sections where, in the old game, where you had to pass a room, and you'd walk into a room full of enemies all the time. But in the old game, there'd be wave after wave after wave after wave of some creatures, like in the archives, for instance. So you just have to keep fighting like floating dudes and the little Wolverine type guys. This game gets rid of those for the most part. Like the archive section is totally fine now. You roll in there, you kill a couple dudes, and you roll on. And there's not nearly as many of the sections as there used to be. There are some, but they're usually smaller. The one thing that unfortunately wasn't made any better is the camera, which is just as bad as ever. Mostly it's only bad when you're in tight, confined areas. Although in sections where you need to shoot a guy with a bow or whatever, that can be kind of a pain. So some people can get by it, but if you didn't dig it the first time around, it hasn't got any better this time. The original Ninja Gaiden on the Xbox was a visual masterpiece on the system, and is arguably the best looking game that was ever released on it. On the PS3, it's all the same content basically, and just high res. So you have HD res textures. The characters look much better. There's much more detail in pretty much everything you see. Effect-wise, you get a little specular lighting and stuff and whatnot, and characters are self-shadowed, except that it's such a subtle thing that you don't really notice it. But for the most part, it just looks like a very, very nice HD version of the original game. It runs in 1080p. It'll run at 60 frames a second, although at that resolution, every once in a while, maybe 2 or 3 times that we saw in the game, you'll get a screen tear maybe while something's loading. But there are, I mean, it does look phenomenal. So Ninja Gaiden-Sigma for the PlayStation 3, as I mentioned before, is the best version of the three, of the original Ninja Gaiden Black and Sigma. You have all the missions that you had in Black, plus a bunch of new ones. You have Rachel's a playable character. You have a bunch of new tweaks to the gameplay. Basically, it's just the most refined Ninja Gaiden you've ever seen. It's the same game, so if you played it once and you're like, that was pretty good, this is not going to be a completely new experience for you. But if you're a huge fan of the old game, or God forbid that you never actually played it, absolutely must pick up this game, because I mean, it's a phenomenal action title. It's one of the best action titles ever released, and I mean, you owe it to yourself to play through the game. So absolutely go out and get it.